everybody. Welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. As a reminder, you can listen to this show on all major podcast platforms. And if you want to watch it on video, we do have a version on YouTube. Definitely check that out. If you happen to be listening to Apple Podcasts, I would love if you leave a review, you give us the 5 stars, and you share it with your friends. Because the more that we can get the information out about embracing your season, the more people can be encouraged and equipped by all the information shared here. Today, we have an amazing show with Leslie Schilling. She is a registered dietitian, sports nutritionist, and nutrition therapist. She owns a coaching practice specializing in nutrition counseling for families, people with disordered eating concerns, professional athletes, and performers. In addition to running her practice, Leslie has served as the performance nutrition consultant for Cirque du Soleil. That's right, you heard that, folks. I don't know if you've seen those shows. They're pretty amazing. And she's an expert contributor to U.S. News and World Report, sharing advice on parenting and health. Make sure you stay tuned to after the show because I'm going to share some of my 3 takeaways. And believe me, this show changed my paradigm when it comes to dieting culture. So I know you're going to appreciate it. Okay, let's get to my conversation now with Leslie Schilling on this edition of Embracing Your Season. Well, Leslie, I'm so excited that you're joining us here today. This conversation is so important, as you know from your own clients, but my clients as well, and then my family. So thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, I am so excited to be here.
So we talked a little bit offline about how important these conversations are for not only kids, but also for parents. And I was sharing that I have 4 kids myself, 2 daughters and 2 sons. And so this is a conversation that needs to be happening not only with our girls, but also with our boys. So let's just start out with your book, your latest book, Feed Yourself. Tell us a little bit about that and what our audience needs to know.
Yeah, so Feed Yourself is a book about diet culture in the safe places. And so diet culture is a system of beliefs that leads us to believe that thinness is equal to health, is equal to worthiness, is equal to all kinds of things. So it's insidious in our culture. It's everywhere. The safe places in particular, which I like to think are medical offices, schools, even churches, and sometimes homes. And so Feed Yourself really brings to light the lies of diet culture, how it holds us hostage, and how we can, 1, see them, and 2, hopefully be free from them. And that starts a lot with those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you're saying, it's a conversation, which is great. So in your book, you mentioned that health isn't just about diet and exercise. Can you tell us a little bit more about why we're missing out on that bigger picture?
Yeah. So I started out as a dietitian, traditionally trained, very weight-centric approach, meaning very diet culture approach, which, and most medical professionals are trained that way, quite honestly. So it's like weight equals health, right? So I started out that way, and then kind of moved towards this more weight neutral, meaning like we're not really in charge of our weight as much as we think we are. And so I learned so much in kind of my unlearning process from my undergrad and my master's degree that there's so much more that goes into health. And it's not what diet culture would teach us, which is just like the food you put in your mouth and how you move your body. It's so much bigger. It's mental health, it's connection, it's social determinants of health, which sadly I did not learn about in my undergraduate or graduate education. And that would be the things outside of us that impact our health, like where we live. Do we have safe housing? Do we have a bed to sleep on? Do we have education? Do we have clean water? Do we have clean air? Like I live in Las Vegas. The air's not always that clean. I can't control that, things like discrimination and racism and all these things that, and access to good healthcare, non-stigmatizing healthcare, those things impact health at an even greater level than like what you're eating for lunch. And so health is so multifaceted, holistic, even like you said, like this is big picture of connection and mental health well-being, and all of these things play a huge role. Sleep, stress management, safety, all of these things play such a role in our health when diet culture just wants us to focus on diet and movement. So I
Yeah.
really try to help
Yeah.
people see it's so much bigger than what's on your plate. What's on your plate is important, but is it the end all be all? Probably not. It's just a piece of the pie.
It is so interesting that you mentioned the whole socioeconomic piece to this, because I was a social worker for chronically mentally ill. So these are individuals who have had schizophrenia and bipolar and mood disorders. And so as a social worker, I get to live life with them, take them to doctor's appointments and help them grocery shop. Well, usually they were on food stamps, for instance. And so their income was much lower than maybe mine was as even just their social worker. And the choices that they had for the amount of money that they had was so limited. There was no fresh food.
Right.
And in fact, I remember one doctor's appointment where the doctor asked, so what are you drinking in terms of like, what's your water intake? And they would have, gosh, I think they said like two liters of Mountain Dew a day. And think of then the correlation of the caffeine and sugar and pure just chemicals that is going in their body when their brain is already trying to navigate just a health, right? So it just goes to show that our diet and the socioeconomic, there's a piece to that that we as maybe the middle class aren't fully aware of. So I appreciate that you go dig into that a little bit as well.
And that's that part that, I feel like sometimes people have a hard time addressing or acknowledging our own privileges. And you just kind of, brought that up. Like, I didn't realize that I truly had more options than other people had until I started doing this type of study, and until actually I had clients and families of clients very graciously school me on, if I made a recommendation to say, like, I want you to drink this instead, or how about raspberries at $6 a half cup? Like how
Right.
That is quite privileged of like, so when people are like, oh, it's priorities, I'm like, well, really, I wish it were that simple, but it's not. It's when you have, say, $50 to feed a family of 4 for X number of days, you buy what gets them fed. And that might look different from family to family. And I feel like we, if we aren't aware of differences in benefits that people have, whether financial, educational, whatever they are, then we are sometimes quick to make judgments that
Absolutely.
I think we have to really be careful with.
Absolutely. I love that point. And even just, talking to our kids about that, about our blessings that we're able, but, to help others as well, I think is just a big point of us modeling that through our kids and so forth. So let's talk a little bit more about the holistic nature. I'm coming from a psychological perspective, but the nature of food and how it impacts mental health. You had mentioned how sleep's important, and stress obviously makes us hoard those calories to maintain that. But what about just eating for not only our health, but for our mental health? Can you speak to some of that?
Well, I want to just back up and kind of just set the playing field of that. Like, I am a registered dietitian and nutrition therapist that specializes in disordered eating. So over the past 20 years, most of the people who have been sitting across from me or in my Zoom room suffer from undernourishment. And so generally not eating enough, because in a culture that says less is more, we try to do less. And even if you go to, say, a health professional visit and you might be in a larger body, you might be getting unsolicited weight loss advice while you're there for a pink eye. So it's like not even kind of appropriate recommendation at that point. But so you might be trying to move towards health by eating too little, which drastically impacts how your brain works. So the foundation is fed. And so when we can get someone fed, like, generally speaking, 3 meals, couple snacks a day, pretty typical eating. Everybody's different, but that's kind of a general recommendation to kind of get people fed. Coffee's not a meal. A granola bar is not a meal. Both of those together is not a meal. So, like, making sure people are learning to feed themselves adequately and consistently. And then we can say, you know what, now let's do kind of some gentle nutrition stuff outside of diet culture, where it's not about weight, it's not about changing your body, it's about how you feel. And if you feel great having, pepper steak with rice, and it's such a yummy recipe, and you're cooking it with somebody and you love that time and connection with them, that's really lovely for your mental health. And there are things that I do in my office that are a little more targeted depending on the person. But it's the baseline is fed. And I think we often chase micronutrients or certain minerals and vitamins to fix a problem, when in my office the problem is the person's been dieting chronically and they're just generally underfed, and we have to fix that first.
Yeah, I think, I've felt this way. I mean, my body has changed. I've had 4 babies naturally, right? And so I do feel this desire to lose that, change that body weight down by restricting calories, but not taking into account that I'm not actually then filling myself with quality food, right? And the whole foods that my body needs nutrient wise. And so I know in your book, you even talk about you can trust food. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah. And I just want to validate that, of course, you feel that way in diet culture. Our whole lives, we've been taught that, smaller is more valuable, which is so wrong. But I just want to validate that it makes sense that you would feel like, oh, I have to get back to this place. And your body didn't go anywhere. So there's nowhere to go back to. So your body's been on this, journey with you, and bodies change over time. But these bodies are so miraculous. They're so miraculous. They can handle famine. I mean, not a good idea, but they can handle it, right? And I will say your body doesn't know the difference between dieting and famine. And so we have to really think about how these beautiful things were designed. And so when we get food, whether it be my beloved Cheez-Its, or, a juicy North Carolina tomato, or I'm from North Carolina, or, the raspberries or the rice or the pepper steak, or when we get those things, these very wise bodies know what to do with it. And so there are times, my goal is to help people kind of make peace with food. There is no reason to be afraid of food unless you have a medically diagnosed food allergy. And then we're talking about something different. But when we're afraid of food, that probably harms us more than any particular food that we can put in our bodies. And so we can trust food, meaning outside of a legitimate food allergy or something, say, like celiac disease. These amazing bodies can handle what we give it, even if it's something that diet culture would deem as, like, I'm using my air quotes, a bad food or unhealthy. And unhealthy is food fear. So that's really, like, I love all the foods. Like, I love, I'm obsessed with Trader Joe's maple cookies at the moment. They're like, it's like cookie manna. They're amazing. They're so good. But also, like, I'll have one of those, 2 of those here and there, but I also have lots of other things. But that's also part of my privilege. Like, I can afford a wide variety of food. And so we can trust food. And diet culture is what has made us feel like food has power over us, when it's this system of beliefs that has made us fear food in our bodies.
So, I hear you saying that food itself is good. And I love the idea that the unhealth piece in that is that fearing food is going to control us. It's going to manipulate us and influence us, but also just making wise choices with the foods as well. Can you speak to some of that?
Yeah.
When we're just trying to eat more mindfully.
Yeah. And here's the thing, when we can get diet culture off our plates and out of our minds, like, we can make those choices. Like, for example, I'm a dietitian and I joke with my clients. I'm like, I guess I could eat more fruit, like, I like fruit. I just, just don't think about it, So those are the things that you could do is like, I'm a big fan of making additions, not saying you can't have, because let's think about that autonomy that we all have. And if somebody says you can't have something, like, what do you want? You want the thing you can't have. And so we want to make our own choices, which is this autonomy is this beautiful thing that we all have. And how can we make those choices outside of diet culture? It would be like, okay, well, I like fruits and vegetables. I would like to incorporate those more into my life. How could I do that? Well, I know for me, I really like oranges. I don't like peeling them. So if I took 20 minutes to peel a whole bunch of oranges and put them in a container in my refrigerator, then that increases my accessibility to that food for eating that food. I also, say you're a person who really likes salads, but the thought of making a salad is really overwhelming, or it doesn't feel like you have the skills to put that together. Well, here's where these convenience foods can be really helpful. Like, I am not going to shave a Brussels sprout, but if Trader Joe's does or Kroger does, like, I will buy it and I will enjoy it and so don't be afraid of buying things like bag salads that sound fun. So, okay, you can increase your veggie intake that way if you want to do that. And so diet culture has led us to believe like only something off the vine is good enough. And that's kind of ridiculous. So we really have to kind of find that spot in the middle where it's like, perfection is really the enemy of, progress or moving towards health if that's what you choose to do. And then the other mindful component is taking a moment to really listen to what your body needs. If you feel like you're a person who doesn't have hunger cues at all, it's possible that they've been maybe diminished or the volume has been turned down a little bit from chronic dieting or restriction. That happens because these bodies are so amazing. How horrible would it be if you were hungry all the time and didn't honor that? These bodies are really smart and can make a lot of adaptations, whether those are good ones or not. So listening to those cues that we have, and if you feel like you don't have them, like start with getting the 3 meals, just 3 meals a day, eating mechanically at first, if that's something you want to do to like once we start feeding the body consistently, those cues generally show up for people. Like, oh, there's that gentle feeling of hunger that I have. And for me, I kind of, I've been practicing this a long time. So I get either like snack hungry or meal hungry, And so,
Ooh.
yeah, I'm like, I'm snack hungry right now. Or, sometimes people are like, I'm meal hungry, but it's like 4:00. I'm like, that's okay. There are no rules. So,
that's
they're
right.
just,
We're adults.
I know, like, you're grown. Do what you want to do. I say that all the time. I'm like, you are grown. Do what you need to do for yourself. And so listening, because what's funny is like when hunger strikes in diet culture, we are like, no way. It can't be possible. I had this very small lunch at 1:00, or I had this, that, and the other at 1:00 and it's 2:30. There's no way. So we spend all this mental energy denying what a very wise body is trying to say. It's a gaslight. But when your bladder is full, you're never like, there is no way, no way this bladder is telling me the truth. Like, we don't do that. But it's because diet culture has made us question need, which is divinely designed. Like when a baby is born, you watch it bob at the breast or the bottle. These amazing bodies know what they need. And so we have to kind of get back into listening to that. And part of that is getting off social media if it's harming us in that way. And it can harm us, one, through distraction, but it can also harm us through generally, the evidence is pointing towards it increases body dissatisfaction and eating disorder behavior, which would be skipping meals, chasing a number on the scale. And so if we find that social media or even some certain friends that are always talking about changing their bodies are really keeping us from caring for our bodies appropriately or adequately, then we really have to think about if that's something we need to spend time with. And that can help with our mindfulness too.
I love that. So again, it's not just with the food, but it's also your surroundings, your environment, what you're exposing yourself to, and the lies that are being spoken over you and
Yeah.
identify them as such, I think
Yeah.
is great.
And that comes back to those conversations because, like, if my daughter is in the 6th grade and we've been having these conversations since before she was in elementary school, because she would come home and be like, well, we talked about good food and bad food. And we're real careful not to dichotomize because, for example, there was a child in one of her classes and I was a volunteer in her class, and this child would bring potato chips for lunch every day. And there were plenty of people like making comments about this child's potato chips. But what they didn't understand is this kid had a feeding issue, and this was the food that got him fed. So one, it was nobody's business, but two, it was, foods that we deem either good or bad, air quotes, are the foods that get some people fed because of feeding disorders and all kinds of things. And so I think we have to keep those things in mind, as like being real careful not to make judgments about how others are choosing to feed themselves as well.
Yeah. Well, let's go there. Let's talk about with our kiddos. Like, how do we raise them in this world where they're inundated by diet culture? We're
Totally.
experiencing this as their moms and dads. So, how can we raise them to view their body as healthy and wonderfully designed?
Yeah. Well, I think we never discuss weight with them, because
Mm.
weight is a construct of diet culture. It's your gravitational pull. I mean, it is, there are things that we need weight for, which would be like, you need my weight if I am going to have anesthesia. Please don't guess. It's a really good time to get it. So those are things that you need. Like, when my daughter goes to a doctor visit, there's one doctor that she goes to annually, and that is where we do a weight check. She steps on backwards. I say, let's see how strong you are. We don't talk about the numbers at all, because it's not appropriate to talk about those numbers in front of kids, because they're supposed to change all the time because they're growing. And as an eating disorder specialist, 50% of the kids that come into my office have had a negative conversation in a medical office. So we talk to our kids about, hey, there are things that happen in our culture that are untrue. Like weight is a proxy for health. It's really not, if you look at the evidence, and dieting leads us to poorer health. And so, I think we can have these honest conversations, like when the assignments come home that say dichotomize the food or add up all the calories in your Thanksgiving meal. All of those things are pretty dangerous, and really can flip that domino towards disordered eating or even a clinical eating disorder. And they're not rare. And matter of fact, even before COVID, the incidence rates of eating disorders doubled in the United States. And that was before COVID.
Wow.
So we know it's worse now, because COVID really put the lighter fluid on disordered eating development. So we have to have the conversations. And I think it's important that we don't dichotomize bodies either. And so there are people in our world that live in larger bodies, and that's genetically appropriate for them. They're big people. They come from big genetics. They have, it's interesting. It's like nobody tells me I should have a smaller foot. Like, I wear like a size 9 shoe, and nobody's like, girl, you should be a 7. Nobody does that, because it's genetics, but like, bodies are the same. And these ideal body weight things that we hear, or the kids might hear in school, ideal body weight charts came from insurance tables, not science. And so,
Whoa.
yeah.
Dang, that changes
It
things.
changes things. So it's like, and so much of the stuff that we trust, and this is me, like, having to like pay back tens of thousands of dollars for my master's education too, and then turn around and pay a whole lot more to unlearn it. Like, oh my gosh, I learned these things and I adhered to a lot of this in my practice, and then realized that, wow, the evidence really just doesn't support that like yo-yo dieting is hurting people. And when we say somebody living in a larger body is, possibly, I'm using my air quotes, lazy, or we make assumptions like they must eat poorly, we're making judgments that aren't ours. And, body diversity is divine. Larger bodies, smaller bodies, medium, lumpy bodies, short and tall bodies have always been with us. But diet culture makes us think there's only one type of body to have, and it's really, really dangerous. And we have to talk to our kids about that. My daughter will come home and be like, yeah, that was health propaganda. I'm going to need you to help me find an alternative assignment. Like, we talk about that stuff all the time because I want her to know that you will learn untruths in the safe places. And in this house, we believe all food is good food and all bodies are good bodies. And like, even when I don't know what to say, sometimes when she'll stump me or her friends will stump me, I have those one-liners like food is food or all bodies are good bodies, so I can at least not ride the wave of into diet culture for them.
Okay, just to clarify with food, is there a correlation between heart disease and diabetes type 2 with food?
Yeah, and it's the dichotomy is what leads us to really have those poor coping mechanisms around food, like being like, oh, this food is bad. Oh no, so I'm eating it. So screw it. I'll have 12. Like it's the good food, bad food thinking that lands us a lot of times in these places where we're using food in a way that doesn't really feel good. But things like, here's what really changed my mind from being weight-centrically trained to weight-neutrally trained, is to look at some of these long-term randomized controlled trials, which is the best type of research we have to show, like, this 9 or 10 years, there was a diabetes type 2 study, went 9 or 10 years, the NIH revoked the funding because the goal was let's have these people lose weight to improve their diabetes. It did not happen. Things that improved the diabetes were like helping with meal planning, having group support, moving their bodies joyfully. So the looking for weight loss to be a factor in better health outcomes wasn't there. And so yes, we can eat well and do all the things, but we still might end up having things like type 2 diabetes. It doesn't mean that you gave it to yourself. And I will say there's a lot of shame involved with that diagnosis because that's what our culture thinks, is that we did this to ourselves. And that's really there's a genetic component there. And you know what plays a bigger role than food there? Stress.
Yes.
And another thing that, same with heart disease, and another thing that impacts your risk of having heart disease and type 2 diabetes is chronic dieting. And so when we look at the studies to say, like, if you're a person who lives in a larger body, you're at greater risk for X, Y, and Z. If we were to control for chronic dieting, which was recommended to us because that's what we do in healthcare often, is try to fix it with weight loss, the impact on the body of a weight decrease and a subsequent increase, and that happening constantly, is so stressful on the body that it increases your risk for cardiovascular disease, diabetes. So all the things we blame on food could be blamed on chronic dieting.
Holy cow. That's amazing. I've never even heard that before. That's incredible. And again, it goes to education, right? Like, what does the food industry or what does insurance want us to hear? When in reality, as you said, we have to unlearn those things and, educate ourselves. Gosh.
Yeah, and eat. Like, we're so afraid of food that, like, we'll do things like, only eat these certain foods, or clean, which does not have an actual definition at all. It's a diet culture term. So eating, clean, but then we'll have these unregulated supplements that someone's selling with like 6,000 ingredients when we're afraid to eat like a Cheez-It. I mean, it's, so that's diet culture for you. And so it is in the safe places, which is what the whole point of me writing this book has like been on my heart for a decade, just sitting across from people suffering in diet culture, and myself, I live here too, so is to help people see, like, health professionals mean well. Nobody intentionally wants to bring someone to harm, but there are things we're not talking about, because also there's a huge, money plays a big role in our healthcare system. And so, like, the BMI is also not a good proxy for health, the body mass index, but we use it because it's a quick and easy measure, but it was never meant to be a diagnostic tool. And the American Medical Association charged their own committee members to find the evidence that larger bodies or higher BMI was a disease state. They came back with the evidence that it was not. They did not have enough evidence to say, yes, let's make these O words a disease, but they voted yes anyway without the evidence. Because, and we've built this whole war on larger bodies in our society because then they could get reimbursed for all kinds of different things. So there's a lot of money involved, and I don't want to believe it. And it sounds awful. And there are a lot of doctors that like are weight neutral and get it and are stepping over, like I did, to a more weight neutral approach. But there's a bigger system at play because diet culture is involved even in our healthcare research. It's everywhere. So we have to talk about it. We have to. Yes. My husband's a researcher, so I'm always like talking to him all the time about it. I probably drive him crazy, but also it's interesting when you look at some of the study designs too. It's like if you go into a study already deciding that someone in a larger body or someone who eats X, Y, and Z is going to be lesser or unhealthy or whatever, you might just find that. So there's a lot of bias.
Yes. Yeah. Gosh. And I thought I knew that, but that was just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, this is why these conversations are so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had people like read certain chapters, like the one on BMI, because like I'm super against BMI. And even the American Medical Association came out this year was like, oopsies, we shouldn't have been using this, but we kind of still are, because what else can we do? But but yeah, some of the things that we've just always thought was like, this is just how we do it because it's science. Well, it wasn't. It was based on an insurance table.
Oh, man. Well, Leslie, I mean, I've learned a lot. I've gained so much from this conversation. I know my listeners have as well, but I would love for them to reach out to you, to read your book. So where can they contact you, or where can they get a hold of your stuff?
Yeah. Well, pretty much everything is at leslieschilling.com. And the book is available anywhere. Feed Yourself is available anywhere books are sold in all formats. If you are into Audible or audiobooks, I read it. So that was fun. And in terms of the socials, if you're on it, I spend most of my time, if I'm on social, at Instagram, which is just at Leslie Schilling.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for this information. Again, it was a paradigm shift in my own life, and I know it will be for my listeners. So thanks again for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey guys, I know that you appreciated hearing all of that information from Leslie, right? Like, crazy some of the things that are going on behind the scenes, or things that we have learned that we actually need to unlearn. Lies that we believe about ourselves, our body, and what health or the perfect appearance looks like. All of that stuff. It's crazy, all the things that we now understand because of the culture that we've been surrounding ourselves with, or as Leslie said, dieting culture, and what that has done to influence and frankly manipulate us. I know for me personally, I've gone on a health journey in the last year. You all know that I have 4 kids. I've had 4 kids naturally, but that's not where I started gaining weight. In fact, I started gaining weight in the last couple years because of just lifestyle choices. Things like convenience, things like eating at 10 p.m. after soccer games or practices, and not making wise choices necessarily with what I was consuming. And so I made the choice that I wanted to be a healthier person. I wanted to fit in certain clothes again. But mostly it's because I noticed it impacted my mental health, my energy level, and I was starting to have some systemic issues with joints and GI tract, all the fun things that no one ever talks about. But you and I can have a conversation because we're friends, and obviously we talk about these things. But in this health journey, I was able to actually redefine my relationship with food. And I joined a program, I had a coach, and I'm still on this, and I've lost 20 pounds. But here's the best part. The thing that I learned from Leslie today is it's not about weight, because I can get stuck in this mindset of, I don't want to go back to that place. I don't want to gain all of this weight back. No, the reality is that I want to just be happy with my body. My body has done some miraculous things. It's birthed 4 kids. I am in my 40s. I am healthy and I am happy. And weight should be absolutely at the bottom of my list of priorities at this point. So it helps us have this appreciation for what we look like and who we are and being proud of our bodies. And we're all designed differently. That's something special and beautiful as well. So today, my takeaways from Leslie's conversation is 1, don't be afraid of food. So food fears is actually more unhealthy than the food itself. Can you imagine that? I know personally from my own mental health clinical experience that stress has a way of not only changing our brain chemistry, but actually creating harm to our bodies. So if we are looking at food as if it is dangerous, that's going to cause stress and it's going to eliminate the ability to eat healthy foods or to give our body the foods that it needs. So stop being afraid of food. Food is not the problem. Secondly, she says, make additions to your eating, not, I can't have this. So there's a paradigm shift in the whole thing of just don't tell yourself not to have something, because we're all rebellious children still at heart, aren't we? We all throw tantrums if someone tells us no. Well, if we're telling ourselves no, that's going to make us want to lean into rebellion more and eat those things or to supplement with maybe something else. She's saying, no, just add to your diet instead. Diet, when I say diet, I'm not talking about dieting culture. Instead, I'm talking about the menu that you feed your body during the day. So again, quit telling yourself you can't have something. Instead, just add something additionally to that. My final takeaway is take a moment and listen to the cues that your body is giving you. I love the fact that our bodies are so, and she even used this word, divinely designed. How cool is that phrase? Our bodies are designed with purpose and on purpose. So if our bodies are saying we need something or that we're hungry, listen to our bodies. I love the example she gave is when you have a full bladder and it's time to go to the restroom. Of course, you're not going to say, nope, I just went an hour ago. I shouldn't have to do this now. No, when our bodies say that we're hungry, it's because we're hungry. We need to treat our bodies with honor and respect. And in that, we listen to it. Sometimes that's all we have to do is just listen and say, I am in a place where I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, but my body is telling me that I need to engage in some nutrients. So I'm going to choose mindfully and eat something to be a blessing to our bodies. So I love that. I did also take one other thing away regarding talking to our kids about this. First off, you are modeling for your kiddos. If you talk ashamedly about your body, about your weight, about your clothes, about your hair, your appearance, all across the board, our kids are going to pick up on that. And that goes for both boys and girls. So be mindful, but also be mindful of talking about weight with our kids. She gave some great examples about what happens when you're at the doctor, or if our kiddos are in health class or learning about their bodies and they have an assignment that they need to do that might be unhealthy for their mental health or as their body image. So in our show notes, there's going to be a link there that she's going to give some suggestions about research, about BMIs, as well as maybe talking to your teachers or administration about how you could do a different assignment if that doesn't work out for your kid, because it could be detrimental for their mental health and their image. I really hope that this show and this episode has been great for y'all. I know that I learned a lot. Again, paradigm shift. We got to start opening our eyes to what this world is projecting in terms of dieting culture as well as body shaming, and help our kids be raised knowing that they are fully loved, fully appreciated just the way that they are. I hope this show was encouraging and equipping. We'll see you next time.